Hello everybody, and welcome to the SkillCourt team. This video is going to serve as an introductory video to kind of give you a high-level overview of how SkillCourt works. There's going to be a lot of information in this video, so if there's any time where you feel it's going too quickly, feel free to pause, read the text, and unpause when you're ready. So, getting this application, we knew that we had to add some new feature. When we got SkillCourt, it had a single-player mode, but for the semester we were tasked with adding a multiplayer mode for it. SkillCourt also had no website before us, so one of our developers actually developed that as well. For the project, we divided into multiple sprints, similar to how you'll be doing in this semester. You can see the breakdown here, from the beginning up until the final documentation at the end. Here's an Excel document which you'll also receive with this. And here are some implemented user stories that we did throughout the semester. These user stories were broken up into different tasks, and you can see that breakdown as well on the Mingle. So for our use cases, you can actually see how in the first one, a challenger can actually send an invitation to play a multiplayer game to someone else. And here's a breakdown here. To actually play a multiplayer game with someone, the workflow is shown here. Either creating a lobby, joining a lobby, and playing through. Use case over here is for signing in or registering. And this use case diagram is for the website, for the little side scroll bars that we have. These are our sequence diagrams. The first one is for logging in with Facebook. The second is for registering a new user through the application. This third one is for the side scrolling that I talked about earlier. This one over here is for creating a lobby. This one here is for joining a lobby. When the two players are matched up, this use case is for synchronizing the players, which I'll talk more about later. The sequence diagram describes sending a notification to a user as a challenge. The sequence diagram selects a player from the search, so when you actually issue a challenge, you can actually select them from a list. The sequence diagram shows how someone opens the notification once they receive it. This is the accepting the notification. This is declining it. And this is displaying the notification to your screen. So, for the architecture, the SkillCourt application, we programmed primarily in Android Studio for the mobile app. For this, you actually use Arduino boards, which are in the pads that you kick into. If you've seen a video of SkillCourt already, then you know that there's a bunch of different pads. They can glow green or red, and you have to kick into them. We have a Node.js server that we're using to send notifications through Firebase Cloud Messaging, and we're communicating to the server using HTTP requests. The website was done with an MVC framework. To actually use this, there's not much you need. If you have Android Studio, you're pretty much good to go on the mobile app side. If you want to test, you can use the Arduino SkillCourt pads. The reason why those are somewhat important is because when you're going to be using the multiplayer options, to actually see the multiplayer UI, you need to actually start a game state. So once you start a game state, you actually need the pads to verify the connection, which means you have to be on the same network as the pads. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do much testing on the UI side. For the website, any pretty recent computer is going to be fine. It works on just about every browser and mobile device. So, for our persistent data design, you can see here how it's broken up. One thing I wanted to mention to you all though is Firebase is a little different than normal databases you've probably worked with before. When you work with Firebase, It actually is a real-time database, which is amazing, but the problem, as I guess the trade-off would be, that there is very little data consistency. So anything that you, let's say, want to add a field to something in the tree, you can do so. It just won't be shown pretty much anywhere. I can actually show an example here. So here's Firebase. If we, let's say, go to the users table, we have a bunch of different users, right? So let's look at the first one. Here's an email, ID, and a name. If you go to this one, which was also made this semester, here's an email, an FCM ID, and a photo URL. So there's actually some disconnect here, right? And then if you even go further, we see in this case, we have an email, FCM ID, some games, a photo URL, a role, and teams. So if you're going to be using some data from the database, you might have to understand that you might want to go from that point forward and not so much go to old data unless you're accounting for the situations or you can update it on the fly. So for the security, you need certain permissions to be able to, let's say, write to the database or even read to the database, which is usually granted through the app itself. And this is our minimal class diagram of how the multiplayer activity is going to work, which I'm going to go into more detail in a sec. For the create multiplayer entrance, this actually talks about the first time you enter the app and you click the multiplayer option, you're given three choices: to either directly connect to a player, to enter the lobby, or to exit. If you choose to enter the lobby, you can see all the available rooms currently in Firebase, and from that point you can either make your own room or join a room. Now, no matter which way you actually choose to go in that case, either way you end up in the same different activity, which is you in a room with someone soon, and then you actually end up creating the game. So let's actually show some of this code in the app to kind of clarify a little bit. So when you have SkillCourt, you're going to have this kind of breakdown here. So if you go to Java, SkillCourt, UI is mostly where you're going to be working, but there's, well, obviously a bunch of different things, right? So for the most part, when you're doing work on, let's say, the multiplayer, the single player, or anything like that, it's usually going to come through this, the create game. So in the case of the create multiplayer, which we worked on for the semester, the reason why it's structured like this is we did realize that adding a feature like multiplayer in one semester could be seen as a lot of work depending on how you want to approach it. There are Google Play libraries, which are nice, but we did see that when we got the project, the single player did work correctly. So what we decided to do was leverage the fact that we were working with a real-time database, and so we had the logic of, if someone's playing a single player game and we can get someone else to start a single player game at the same time through some type of synchronization, such as entering them in a room or directly connecting to a player, we can actually simulate a multiplayer activity by showing them both in a split screen UI, even if they're not directly connecting to each other. We can simulate it through the real-time database, which is the approach that we took this semester. So coming in, you would enter through the create multiplayer entrance, which shows you the three options. Once you come in through there, you go to the create game activity. This is talking about single player, which takes you to the create game fragment, which will then take you to the start game activity, which will then take you to the start game fragment, and then begin the game. So similarly, the create multiplayer actually works the same way. So when you do creating a multiplayer game, you have a create multiplayer game activity, which goes to create multiplayer game fragment, which goes to a start multiplayer game activity, which goes to a start multiplayer game fragment. So the workflow is, for the most part, very similar in structure, and that's what we were trying to go for. And besides that, most of the things you might be working on would be in the layouts. So if you go to the resources folder here and expand the layouts folder, you can see a bunch of different UIs they were using for this application. It might seem a little daunting at first, but there are some that you end up visiting a lot more than others. So for our case, we worked a lot on things like the fragment multiplayer game, which is the UI when you're actually playing. There's the dashboard UI if you're waiting in the room with another player, and different things like that. Adding it is pretty straightforward too, just like adding a regular class in Java. And I believe the only thing really left to show is let's run the app. Okay, so the app started up. This is the main launcher activity. You can find it in the UI folder right there. So let's sign in. There's an account already in the system, test2@test.com. The password is in all lowercase, test123. I'm gonna sign in. So there's a couple different things you can do here. This is the main dashboard. In the main dashboard you normally see like graphs of how you've been doing during games. Below is like a list of your past games and how you did in those. Down here you have the little running man is how you start a single player game. So if you click that, it tries to connect to the Arduinos on your local network. Now since I'm not actually connected to any, this is never going to stop spinning, so let's look at some other things. So you can sign out here. This is to change your role in the database. In the menu over here, this is the main menu. You can do multiplayer, which we implemented this semester. Coaching, where you can like create sequences for players. Dynamic sequences, which is setting up the sequences, but that still needs some work. It's not working 100%. And Event Manager, which was started this semester, but hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. Currently, it just changes your role in the system. Quickie Multiplayer also goes into the create multiplayer engines, which I talked about earlier, but we're not going to get too in depth because, well, this is just an intro video, of course. So that's about it for the app. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact us. We're going to be in touch with you throughout the semester. I strongly suggest that you watch the other videos to kind of help get an idea of how things were coded, why things were done, and to kind of get your feet wet. The most important part of this is probably going to be the first 2 weeks or so you can get off to a strong start. Like, the faster you understand the app, the faster you can get to work. And I think that's about it, guys. Good luck.